about a series that I'm starting discussing the PAM, the AHA's Program Administration Manual, and delving into the details and kind of helping clarify things for people. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and also sometimes it can be a little difficult to understand or to interpret exactly what the PAM is talking about. So we're going to go ahead and jump into that here in just a second. I see there's a bit of a lag. I'm going to see if I can fix that really quick on my end. Hopefully. Let me drop it down. Let's see. Let's see if that helps a little bit. I think it does. So anyway, we're just going to talk about the PAM, and it's found in the AHA's instructor network under the PAM tab. And I'm just going to go category by category, starting out with TC organization. So it talks about the structure of the AHA training network. And I think for most people this is pretty self-explanatory, but there's a couple things that people may or may not know. So you have the AHA training network, then you have training centers, and a training center can be anybody, either from like a hospital or fire department to what they call ETCs, entrepreneurial training centers, and that would be somebody like myself. We're for-profit. We're primarily focused on outside training people in the community, whereas opposed to like a fire department or a hospital, primarily are going to be focused inwardly on training their own people. You've got under a training center coordinator. We'll talk more about what that is and who it is. Training center faculty, and then instructors, and then a training site is under a training center. I talk to a lot of instructors. Sometimes they mix up this terminology, or it's interchangeable to them, and they'll say, I want to become a training center. I was like, do you mean a training center or a training site? So there's a difference. A training center is going to be above a training site. And again, we'll talk about what a training site is here in a second. And then every training site, they're kind of like mini training centers. They have their own training center or training site coordinator. They have their own instructors, and they have their own training center faculty. Now, in the PAM, one thing that they leave off and they don't talk about at all is a TC admin, and it is an additional position that the AHA allows a training center coordinator like myself to designate somebody to be a training center admin or a TC admin, and it's primarily a logistical role to help the training center coordinator with approving people in the AHA network, alignments, and so forth. And that's about it. They can approve alignments, they can approve e-card locations, training sites, so forth. So it's I don't really know why they don't list it in the AHA hierarchy, or why they don't really even talk about it or give a definition of what it is, but it is a position that exists. Generally, you're not going to hear about it, but it does exist. And in our case, we've got Doug Fabick and Cheryl Burkholder are two of our staff members here, and they both are TC admins along with training center faculty. So what's the role of a TC? Role of a TC is to maintain compliance. Ultimately, the training center is liable for everything that their training sites and instructors do under them. The PAM also says that a TC is supposed to provide timely communication of any new or updated information about AHA changes, course curriculum, and so forth. And so, when you're looking for a good training center, one piece is how well do they communicate to you. I have instructors almost on a daily basis that are like, I didn't know that this existed, or about this or that. And it's like, well, one, you should have gotten that in your instructor class, and or your training center should have sent you a memo. We post all of our memos online in our instructor portal, so everybody has access to it, and we pass along information. It's kind of interesting. I don't understand why it's this way, but the AHA there's some information that they'll send out to everybody, and then there's some information that they only send out to the training center, and then they expect the training center to forward it on to all the instructors. Why they don't just, if they want everybody to know about it, why they don't just forward it to everybody, I don't have a good answer for. And AHA may not have a good answer either, to be quite honest. But that is that's how it is right now. So training centers are responsible for sending out information. And then as far as training center criteria, super common question. People want to know how they can become their own training center. It's a pretty difficult thing. For years, like about a decade, the AHA didn't allow anybody to become a training center. And then over the last couple of years, in 2018, 2019, they just started shutting training centers down left and right. They didn't give a reason, but it was pretty evident that they were shutting small training centers down that weren't doing large volumes of students. And I think that was just in an attempt to try to lessen the burden on the AHA to not have as many people to look over and manage. But then in about 2020, beginning of 2020, they started making people training centers again and opening that up. But there are still some criteria that they have for that. They list that here in the PAM. They say that a training center needs to support the AHA mission. The training needs of a given area based on geography, population, community needs, and the healthcare environment also dictate whether or not you can become a training center. So if you're in a place like California where it's really oversaturated, or New York City, you're probably going to have a really hard time becoming your own training center, whereas if you're in another state, it's not as hard. They talk about how you need to be able to meet their liability insurance requirements, and you have to have internet access and a current active email address. So that's the basics criteria, but they go on to talk about how you also need to have been a training. You have to be a training site before you can become a training center. You can't just go from 0 to 100, and you have to have been a training site for 2 years. And again, we're going to get to what is a training site and how to become one in a minute, but that's the requirements. And they look also at how many people you're training in a fiscal year. So for most of you who are training external customers to become a BLS training center, you have to have 3,000 students a year that you're training. If you want to become an ACLS training center, you have to train 600 or more. And to become a PALS training center, you need to train 450 or more people. So that's a lot of folks. Not everyone is able to make those numbers, especially ACLS and PALS can be super difficult to attain those numbers, even if you're a pretty large company. And they also say that you must be interested in managing a training business, which is interesting that they use that terminology, but they're not looking for people who do this on the side. They want somebody who's wants to actually make this a full-blown company, which if you're doing 3,000 BLS students a year, you probably are a full-blown company and have a lot of that structure in place. What else? When we talk about like actual positions of the training center coordinator, training center faculty, generally a training center coordinator is somebody who's been designated to run the training center. You don't actually have to be an instructor to be a training center coordinator, which I think is a disservice, to be honest. It's super difficult to come in. I've seen this happen. The reason why they make this a policy is because really, I think more so for the hospital systems, who they're just taking nurses and moving them into these administrative roles, and they may or may not already be an instructor. So it's to accommodate them and how hospitals sometimes function. But I've seen this happen where a hospital will take a nurse who has zero clue about the AHA. I mean, doesn't know how to be an instructor, doesn't know how the AHA is structured, and they put her in this role as training center coordinator, and it's a mess for a good while because they just have no bearing. And the AHA is trying to fix that, so they'll have webinars and orientations for new training center coordinators. They also have education subcommittee members, which any person can be, any instructor can be a education subcommittee member, and they'll get assigned a training center coordinator to help mentor and answer questions and whatnot. So they're trying to kind of provide a resource for these training center coordinators who have zero bearing about the AHA or about being instructors, but it still can be kind of messy, unfortunately, and it's not a perfect system. Training center faculty. Okay, there's no special course that you have to take to become a training center faculty. It's just me as a training center coordinator. I'm like, I need some help. I need some people that can assist me in running this training center. So similar to a training center admin, training center faculty is just an appointed position, and I can tell anybody, hey, I need you to be a training center faculty, and that qualifies you then to monitor instructors within our training center, and renew them in their instructor discipline. It also qualifies you to teach instructor classes. Now here personally at Prime, even though you're a training center faculty, it doesn't mean you're allowed to both renew people and train new people. So we consider being able to monitor and renew instructors to be like level 1, and then the next level up is being able to train instructors. So just because you're a training center faculty for us doesn't automatically grant you the privilege of doing everything that a training center faculty is allowed to do according to the AHA. They also give some parameters or suggestions about ratios. So you're supposed to have like one training center faculty to every 8 to 12 instructors that are under your training center. In our case, that's again not something that we follow closely to. It really depends on the capacity of the training center faculty. So in our case, we have several full-time staff here who are able to handle way more than 8 to 12 instructors because they're full-time. That's literally their only job is to basically function within that training center faculty role. So it's more like one training center faculty to 100 instructors, but that's all they do day in and day out, and so it's manageable for them to monitor all those people. But if you're a training center that doesn't have full-time staff like that, and you're using maybe part-time people or independent contractors, then you should stick to that one training center faculty per 8 to 12 instructors. I think that basically covers everything. The AHA does go into how to what a training site is and how to become one. That's in a later section that we'll be covering tomorrow or the next, probably actually it looks like 2-3 days from now. So stay tuned, we'll cover that and we'll answer some commonly asked questions related to how to become a training site. But that's the overall structure of the AHA network today. Appreciate you guys checking in. If you have questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'd be happy to answer any and all. And you can also send me an email, andrew@primemedicaltraining.com. Thanks so much.